This program is made possible by funding from the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies, where government leaders, business executives, and academic experts come together to discuss major issues facing the state of Florida.
Hello and welcome to UCF Metro Center Election 2012. I'm Diane Trees, Director of the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies, and your host for the evening. This fall, we're bringing you a series of political discussions in an effort to help you decide at the polls. Metro Center Election 2012 is brought to you by WUCF, Central Florida's home for PBS, in collaboration with the League of Women Voters. Tonight, we resume our conversation on age in the election with a look at the senior vote. Baby boomers and those over the age of 65 register in large numbers and are almost twice as likely to cast their ballot as young voters. Joining me tonight to discuss the importance of the senior vote are Charles Gray of the Gray Robinson Law Firm and Susan MacManus, a professor from the University of South Florida. Charlie, Susan, welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
Let's talk about the presidential election. In comparison to others that we've seen in our lifetime, how important is this one?
Very important. We've had a tie for months on end. Florida's been at the center of all of it. The country is very polarized from a partisan perspective, and a lot of everyday people are suffering and very upset that there doesn't seem to be any solutions being put in place by elected officials. So there's a lot at stake here for just about everyone.
So there's a lot more engagement this time around than possibly in the past for elections.
Even though people say they just can't look at it another minute, they can't
They
stay
do.
away from the TV set on the debates or whatever else.
Right.
It's just that interesting, and everywhere you go, people are talking about it.
Charlie, are you watching it as avidly as?
Isn't everybody? Of course. And it is an extremely important election. I think it will determine the way our country goes in the future.
With the 2008 election, there was a 16% turnout for the 65 plus voters. How key is that voting bloc for this year's election? Charlie, what do you think?
Well, you know, in the past, recent past, that bloc, that group, tended to vote Republican. And I think that you're coming into a situation now where I'm not sure that that's going to hold true. I think it may be split evenly. There are so many things that are in the play right now, you know, with Social Security, with Medicare, and with the direction of the economy, with the young people out of work, and grandparents and parents are concerned about that. And I think a lot depends on how that group of people view where we are and where we're going. So many of them, their parents went through, or their grandparents went through the Great Depression. I know my parents went through the Great Depression. And to have come through what we've come through without getting into a depression is simply amazing. A very expensive proposition, but how we dig our way out of this is going to be really important, and we've got to. I think that the seniors are looking at this from the standpoint of not leaving this debt for their children and grandchildren, and
No.
we've got to arrange everything so we can have a plan that will eventually get us to a balanced budget.
This is a very reliable voting bloc. Susan, why is that so with this demographic?
For a number of reasons. First of all, they've been very close to world wars and seeing the importance of democracy and the importance of the vote. So they view it as more of a civic duty than do the younger generations. And also they are, as Charlie said here, extremely concerned about their children and grandchildren. Recent polls have shown that 66% of Americans today do not think that their children are going to be better off than they. We've never seen numbers like that. And they're high turnout. They are very well read. They get their news from a lot of different sources. And they also have very strong opinions. And so all of the above makes them very high turnout voters.
I was surprised with the fact that one of the most dedicated activist groups are single senior women to the tune of about 9 million in number. How powerful might that demographic be? Does that fit in with what you were saying?
Well,
do you think? Does that make sense?
It's because women live longer than men, even though the younger generations were starting to see a narrowing of the gap for a number of different reasons there. But senior women are more likely to be dependent upon the entitlements, Social Security and Medicare. Many of the oldest were not in the workforce, and so they are very dependent upon public pensions and so forth.
Right, and you can vote for as long as you're alive and able to do so.
Right.
In 2008, President Obama ran on a hope and change message, and this did not resonate as well with the 65-plus voter. This time around, we have two candidates, both suggesting some major changes to a lot of the different issues. Who do you think has the edge for the 65-plus voting segment? Charlie, what do you think?
It's hard to say. It really is, because everything seems to be in flux right now. We're looking at housing prices now are increasing. Your building construction industry is starting to revive. The value of people's homes are going up.
Slowly, very slowly.
Very slowly. It is very slowly. But the point is, are you looking at where you are or which direction you're going in? And those that are looking at where we are right now are going to tend to vote against the current administration. Those that can see a direction that they feel comfortable with may vote for the current administration.
Susan, what are your thoughts?
They're evenly split. See, a lot of people look at Florida seniors and they assume that they're heavily Democratic, which was the case when there was a larger share of the FDR era generation still alive. But as we speak, the current registration figures are 42% are Republican and 41% Democrat, and the rest are either no party affiliation or minor parties. So you have an evenly divided senior vote. And the older you get, the more you tend to stick with your party. It's why the Medicare issue hasn't played out as Democrats had anticipated in Florida, because people were making that assumption based upon the old knowledge of what the composition of Florida's senior vote looked like. But both polls that I've seen, most polls will show on the Medicare issue that the seniors are sticking with their party's nominee as being the best for that issue.
So you're saying that the 65-plus voter is more likely to vote along party lines and philosophy rather than looking at the candidates as individuals?
I would say that, yes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the baby boomers, the 45 to 64, just that little bit earlier generation. They've been rocked by this economy, loss of jobs, equity in the houses, bringing in adult children again, taking care of elderly parents, and they're just looking towards their retirement. What are their major issues for this election?
Well, of course, they're looking at their children, their grandchildren, and wanting to leave a better life for them. And I think that's a very important thing. They also are, some of them are still working, or they would like to be working, and there are very few jobs around. They're going to hire a 55, 65-year-old person. Those of us that have work at our age are very fortunate, but there are a lot of people out there who are not, who really would like to go to work.
Right.
It's exactly that boomer demographic that the Medicare issue does resonate more strongly with, for all the reasons that you mentioned. They have tremendously high levels of anxiety. They were thinking about retiring and suddenly that's out the window. I've heard many people say, the baby boomers, well, I'm just going to have to work until I die.
Or
and so
four years longer than you had originally planned to do.
And so everything's been turned upside down, and they're the group that is really the most attentive to any changes in either Social Security or Medicare.
What about then the priority issues for the 65 plus? Is it a little different, or are they overlapping?
I think for the 65 and above, they're not really concerned about Social Security because either party is not going to bother them.
They're already entrenched in it.
They're already in it, and so they're not worried about that. They are worried, I think, about Medicare, what's going to be done there. And I think they're equally concerned about their children and grandchildren. I mean, this is really an important thing. And to have a party that will be on a projection that will balance the budget eventually is really important.
Absolutely.
And I think they're very smart about how that's going to have to happen. And if you know, you can't do it without additional revenue. So I think that they're smart enough to understand you got to have both.
Susan, what do you think?
The deficit is a huge issue with older voters, and it stems back from the recession, and we saw it in the 2010 election, the rise of the Tea Party, where a lot of the activists were retirees. What was shocking to them was the fact that their adult children, not their grandchildren, but their adult children were calling and saying, "Mom, Dad, I'm losing my home. I just lost my job. I can't pay the kids' college tuition." It reminded them so much of the Depression because they're the closest to it. It's why in our state the deficit is a bigger issue among seniors than it is in some other places.
What about some social issues? In the past, same-sex marriage, abortions have separated voting blocks. Do you see that as this critical for this election?
I'm not sure that that's quite as critical. I think that it's critical among those that are younger because you know, you've got the situation with the women. They're interested in their health, and that's going to have an effect on this election. But in the older people, I'm not sure that social issues are that important.
Well, everything's taken a back seat, I think, to the economy,
yeah.
And that's probably across the generations as well.
Right, but you clearly can see generational divides on issues like gay marriage. There's nothing that predicts more how people are going to feel about that issue than age.
Right. Thank you both. Let's take a quick break from our conversation and hear what some of Central Florida's older voters had to say about the election.
So it's pretty scary what will happen in the next couple weeks here. And we're just hoping for the best. And you know, either guy that gets it, I hope they can do what's right for our country.
The economy has been on a slump, and it seems like we're kind of like snailing up out of it, and I don't want to go backwards.
It's such a critical election that with the economy the way it is, with the debt the way it is, the debt it's inexcusable that we have. And if we don't change courses, I don't believe we're going to exist as a country the way we once knew it.
With the economy, and even though I'm retired and I see so many people looking for jobs, I think that's very important. And of course, security for our country and everything, that's very, very important.
Everything we buy comes from China, and it just bothers the heck out of me.
We need to bring the country back to where it was and how it was founded, and we are so far off base from that right now.
It's the economy. It's not in good shape, and I don't see it getting any better right now.
If they say they're going to do something, I'd like to see them do it, you know, and take care of the Americans, you know.
Anyone who can improve the economy is going to change both those things. The strength of our nation financially and the number of jobs we can give our people.
Honesty.
Honesty. Number one is honesty.
Honesty.
And likability. How does he relate to me?
Someone that has a path of direction that's going to take us forward, not backward.
Character, integrity, and honesty in our candidates and in our leaders. We need leaders, really.
Charlie and Susan, let's talk a little bit about the dynamics and how they've shifted over the years with the parties. We have the emergence of the Tea Party. There are more registered independent voters now than ever before. The dynamics with this, is that a negative or a positive force? Susan, what do you think?
Well, it's a force. We certainly know that. It's the fastest growing demographic in the whole country. And when you look at independents in our state, most of them are actually under age 40. And they have heard nothing good about either party.
So the registered independent voters are mostly under the age of 40 for Florida.
They are, yes. And they really don't know what political parties stand for because they have been subjected to, you know, things that look exactly the same. And so they go in and they say, I'm an independent. But the irony is that the younger age group is also now the most solidly Democratic voting. So they register as independents, but they tend to lean Democrat.
So it's not necessarily a true independent in the sense of another party. Interesting.
Right. And
that's
you
very
have
interesting.
seen a lot of an upswing in professionals who don't want to be reporting their party affiliation to anybody for business purposes. So we've seen a little bit of an uptick in that too.
Charlie, with Medicare and Social Security, such huge issues, but the economy seems to be eclipsing everything. Do you think that that is the case, that the economy is even more important for the 65 plus group than Social Security and Medicare?
Yeah, I think it looms very important to them. I don't know that as we said before, it doesn't matter to them so much about Social Security because their deal is built in. But Medicare is an important thing to them. But the economy, I think, is maybe a little more important.
What about the ramifications for the $16 trillion national debt that this generation is leaving, not by choice, but will be leaving for the younger generation, the grandchildren in a lot of these cases? How much of a concern is that for the 65 plus group?
I think extremely so. It shows up in all the polls as either always one of the top 3 issues. And it goes back again to a broader question, which is, how do you see the direction of the country going? And older voters are much more concerned about that than younger, much more negative. And some of it also has to do with what many older voters see as an increasing lack of civility in the world of politics. And I think that you can see some of that reflected in the polls that are taken after the debates. The debates that get too hot and heated are very alienated to older voters, much more than they are to younger voters.
Charlie, you mentioned that too, about the significance of the debt and leaving it to the younger
I think
generation.
it looms very large in everybody's mind, particularly the older people. The key is whether the older people see which party can best get them out of it. And of course, we're talking about 2 parties that have extremes, 2 parties that have intransigent positions, and there's got to be a coming together. And if they see that one party being elected is going to take it off the cliff one way, or the other party might do the same thing, that's the problem you've got with so many independents. You just don't. You can't get anything done in Congress. It's been a pitiful situation.
The philosophical divide seems really intense, and as you said, the 65 plus voter is more likely to vote along party lines.
And seeing politicians put their party above the best interests of our country, this kind of infuriates older people.
Well, it's a sad commentary on what's happening right now. A lot of people are saying that opportunities for young people are lower than ever before. Do you still believe that the American dream exists for the millennials? Susan?
It's going to be difficult.
Maybe
that's
a different
why
American dream.
we saw that so many people don't think their children are going to be as well off as they are. And that's disconcerting to older voters particularly. But the big difference is that so many young people are getting out of college with so much debt. And the jobs that are available are not really the high-paying jobs as much, and they're having to take jobs that really can't help them get rid of their debt, and it's affecting everything else, because if you can't pay your debt, you're not going to be able to buy a home, and have less difficulty, more difficulty buying a car. So everything about the spending, which helps our economic recovery, is delayed by the huge debt of the college students.
I was reading an article, and it was saying that the debt is so huge in some cases that these millennials will be still paying when their kids are entering college, and that's never been in any of our past generations with that. Charlie, there was a congressional or Gallup poll late last year, and it had congressional approval ratings 11%, lower than it's ever been. From an age perspective, do you think that congressional disapproval is reflective of the opinion of the 65 plus voter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that everybody's disgusted with what is not going on in Congress. And a lot of the situation we've got right now can be laid right to their feet. They need to get up there and get to work. They need to come together. They make compromise. And I think the election will be affected a lot by whether people think that one party or another is going to be able to bring people together. So we'll see.
Susan, do you think that that low congressional rating spans all of the voting blocks?
Absolutely. In fact, it even dipped down to 9. It was that bad. We have never in the history of Gallup polling seen such little confidence among Americans in our national institutions, especially our legislative bodies. But when you think about it, and Florida is a good example, when people are worried about keeping their home, losing their job, worried about health care, I mean, and living day to day, and they see a Congress that fights with each other instead of tackling problems or takes trips abroad and recesses early, it is absolutely an us versus them situation.
Well, you're living day to day and with the fear of what's going to happen both there and in a monetary sense. The candidates, do you think that they are adequately addressing the issues for the senior vote? Charlie, what are your thoughts on this one?
Nobody laid out a real good plan for resolving the deficit, a workable, practical plan, and I think that's really important. I think that Social Security, I think everybody knows that you're going to have to make some adjustments there that won't affect those 65 or older, or maybe even a little younger than that. Medicare is one that is escalating at tremendous rate, and I think that seniors are looking at that saying it's not sustainable, and if it's not sustainable, what are we going to do to fix it? And they're worried about that. They're worried about draconian steps that could be taken.
Well, you know, as you said, Medicare is 16% of the federal budget, over $500 billion. Yeah. But is it a really risky political move to suggest changes in a benefit that is so significant to a voting bloc that is high percentage voters?
This is a democracy, and the problem is that people do not want to hear that their income or their benefit is going to be cut in any way. And whoever says that, they're going to have a hard time with them. So people are staying away from that. They're staying away from the environment. They're staying environmental concerns. They're staying away from things that there's a lot of controversy on. And so I think that the senior vote is going to have to, and they will, I hope, think through this whole process, and because it's obvious that we're in trouble. They have to think back to what got us in trouble, and the many years that we had wars, and we had spending without any accountability, without raising taxes. We had wars without any sort of draft. We paid for it by contracting it out and overpaying for what we contracted out, and all these excesses, and this is all coming home right now. Right. We got to figure a way to get out of this hole, and it can't be by simply cutting. We're going to have to go both ways.
Susan, what are your thoughts on this as well?
It's just one of those difficulties. I hear a number of people say it looks like we're just going to have to hit rock bottom before we can get the Democrats and Republicans in Congress to sit down and really come up with a solution, because they keep delaying it. Now, we do have a little bit of evidence in Florida that if you tackle these issues, it's not the end of your political career, because Marco Rubio, when he was running for the Senate, did talk about the need for reform of the entitlement programs, and it seemed not to have hurt him much. And I think a lot of it is because the baby boomer group is thinking through, I would rather have something for what I've already put into a system than nothing. So they're much more amenable to a little bit of reform, but it's still a very tough political nut right now to crack.
So, Charlie, it sounds like you're saying that we need to look at the overall scope of what's best for the country, and also consider what's led us to where we are now, with everything seeming to be a perfect storm and falling apart.
Yeah, we don't want to do it again.
Right, right. Well, the demographics, we're on the verge of a big demographic shift. By the time 2050 comes, we'll have more people worldwide over the age of 60 than younger. Will this always keep Social Security and Medicare in our political realm? Maybe it's just going to be that way no matter what.
Yeah.
I think it will always keep alive, in fact intensify, what some are regarding now as a potential generational combat, because the younger people are going to have to pay for all of this, and there are fewer, the birth rate is lower, so there are fewer in the workforce to support this burgeoning older population. But some things seem like a simple fix, like working longer. I think people could accept that.
Well, considering, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, that's fine.
Considering that this age group is going to be growing in magnitude, with this election and the results, do you think that it's going to be a referendum on the direction that our country's headed? Charlie?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think it's going to be a referendum on how our country's heading right now, and I think it depends on the perception of those that are looking at it, whether they're looking at it from where we are right now or where it looks like we're going. And obviously we're not going fast enough to improve, but we are improving. And but it's a deep hole. At least the old saying, you know, if you dug yourself in a hole, quit digging. And I think we quit digging. I think we're heading up.
I hope so.
But it's not an easy or a quick process.
Right. Susan?
Yes, I think this will be a referendum on what people think is the cause and the solution. The two prongs go together. And it looks like right now the undecideds that are still out there, and there was a lot of discussion of it after the debates, want to look forward. Who can fix it and how fast, rather than looking back and pointing fingers.
So maybe an optimistic look is coming for us.
Well, that's what they would like to see, real solutions. And now, some of these voters ask, for example, can you tell me specifically, how can you fix the problems that I have now? Not 4, 5, 6 years down the way. Immediacy, urgency, very much an issue with a lot of these undecided voters who are going to be the swing.
Thank you so much, Charlie, and thank you so much, Susan, for sharing your thoughts tonight. That's all that we have time for. Thank you for tuning in to Metro Center Election 2012, and thanks to Charlie and Susan for joining us. Remember that Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. To submit a question for a future discussion, visit wucftv.org/election2012. I'm Diane Trees. Thank you for watching.
This program is made possible by funding from the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies, where government leaders, business executives, and academic experts come together to discuss major issues facing the state of Florida.